Okay. All right. Good evening and welcome to the East Lyme Board of Education for Monday, December 18th, 2017. It's a regularly scheduled meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. And for everyone who can rise, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we have a little special award presentation.
Yes, Jeff, we haven't had the opportunity for a Viking Valor in a while, which we started last year. So we are going to honor an individual this evening, which I think brings merit to our reasoning for behind giving these awards every once in a while. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Provost, who is going to talk about our recipient.
Good evening. It's my honor to be here tonight to recognize Kim Hill for the Niantic Center School Viking Valor Award. I wrote a little summary tonight for you just to kind of explain what she does and why she's so important to us at Niantic Center School. Kim is a reading teacher, English Language Arts Consulting, and lead teacher at Niantic Center School. When I arrived at Niantic Center School, Kim was immediately willing to help me with all aspects of the upcoming school year. Working with her over the first summer and hearing some of her colleagues, and many of them are here today, talk about her skills and her work ethic, made the decision recommending Kim for the lead teacher position easy. And it's a decision I am thankful for every day. She does a great job for me. Kim has worked with our teachers and students tirelessly to improve our ELA program at Niantic Center School. When we began our new programs of Lexia and Reading Plus, she was involved with all of the negotiations behind the scenes. She worked with Pat Lannon to set up the accounts, and she often accomplished all of those feats on the weekends in her own time, setting up student accounts so that they'd be ready for Monday morning, and we all appreciate that so much. She set up professional development for teachers, including the areas of Reading Plus, Lexia, and this year our new initiative of working with Jen Scoggin. Kim has not only coached our teachers and set up PD for them, but also works with many of our most struggling readers with incredible success. Kim has worked on the district English Language Arts team to develop non-negotiable assessments and timetables with Amy. She set up all of our files and data spreadsheets for data collection of the non-negotiable assessments and put them in the teacher folder for all Niantic Center School teachers. She's part of our school improvement team, our professional learning community, and a member of our data intervention team. Kim is an advocate for students at meetings, and she follows up with them with kind notes and words of encouragement throughout the year. As a parent of a student who worked with Mrs. Hill, I can attest to her expertise and her rapport with her students. I will share with you that she changed my child's life by working with her and helping her to learn to read and giving her the confidence to try and succeed. Her hard work has not only helped my daughter in the classroom, but has given her confidence on the athletic field and in everyday life. She has been a role model for my daughter, something we sorely need today. I could go on about Kim Hill, but it may be more appropriate to hear a few quotes from her colleagues. Kim Hill has been an integral member of the ELA consultant team. Her ability to collaborate with her colleagues around systemic reforms is integral to moving our district forward. I have personally enjoyed learning from her as we have worked together over the course of the past year. Our students and staff are very blessed to benefit from her knowledge and her skill set every day. That's from Amy Drown. The definition of great is considerably above the normal or average. When I think of great teachers, Kim Hill is at the top of that list. She is great in so many ways. First and foremost, she is an amazing teacher to students and teachers. She educates teachers and students on a daily basis. Next, she has a phenomenal growth mindset. She is always reading and improving herself as an educator. Lastly, she is always willing to extend a hand whenever needed. Kim Hill is the definition of great. That's from Carrie Wiseman. Kim Hill is a true pleasure to work with. She takes on her many classroom and administrative duties with a smile and can be counted on to cover the cafeteria or bus duty if needed. She is someone I can count on for anything. Thank you, Kim, for making my day easier with a surprise scone or a cup of coffee. You deserve this Viking Valor Award. Congratulations, Julie Dowling. Congratulations, Kim, on the Viking Valor Award. You deserve it. I thank you so much for everything you do for all of us.
Your family's here. You want to just introduce your family members? You didn't know we're coming tonight, I heard.
This is my husband, Chris.
Hey.
Nathaniel, who's 13.5, my mom, Chelsea, and my daughter, Elizabeth.
All right.
Welcome.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Eastline Public Schools. And Kim, I'm going to have Jamie give this Viking Valor to you, but on behalf of all of our staff members in
Thank you.
9th Center School, congrats. You're a wonderful
Pleasure.
individual. You
Thank
worked
you.
very hard, so thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
You want to
I
Keep my distance.
We're going to get a picture.
So if I choked him, that probably.
There we go.
So I thought it was just coming here to take notes from him.
Oh, that's
Appreciate
so
it.
nice.
I mean, I work with a great team, so it's not just
Just me, it's everyone, every single person that I work with, so thank you very much. So nice.
Very nice. Okay. Wow. Maybe we should just adjourn and go home. That was very nice to see you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
so much.
Yeah, thanks.
That was awesome.
Okay. Wait a second here.
That was great.
Okay. Public comment? Anybody want to address the board on any matter? No? Nope. Okay. We have some minutes for approval. We have the minutes from our December 4th meeting, which was a regularly scheduled meeting. Anybody want to make a motion on
I'd
those?
like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the December 4th regular meeting.
I'll second.
And Candace seconds it. Any corrections, changes to those minutes? No? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Okay, those are approved. And we also have the minutes from our Committee of the Whole meeting, special meeting, which was on December 11th of this year. Anyone want to make a motion on that?
I make a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of December 11th.
I'll second.
Okay. And any corrections? That was just a budget workshop for people who are interested. Okay, all right. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Let's see. Lee, Al, and Barbara abstained. Okay. Special reports? Hello. We do have a high school student here.
Good evening, everybody. I guess I'll start off by talking about the New England Music Festival, specifically the New England Regional Orchestra. Their auditions were this past Saturday. Also, this past Saturday, Breakfast with Santa was at the high school. The turnout was very good, and the Peers Reaching Out Club helped at the event itself, as well as setting up on Friday afternoon. The indoor track meet was this past Saturday, very busy Saturday. 8 athletes qualified for states, and many more qualified for ECCs, so that was very good. Also, there will be a winter concert this Wednesday in the auditorium at the high school. The band, choir, and orchestra will be playing at that concert. And finally, the extravaganza is running this week at the high school. This year, the school is raising money, so all kids with disabilities have a chance to play baseball. The foundation is the Miracle League of Connecticut, and alongside the traditional show we always have on Friday, there will be a basketball tournament, which has raised $200 so far, and a sumo wrestling portion.
Nice.
Wow. Very good.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, let's see. We don't have a selectman representative, but we do have Mr. Jackson is here from Salem Board.
First of all, I apologize to the other side of the room for abandoning you for a second time this year. I hope that at some point I can abandon this side of the room and return.
It's good to have a mix. It's good to have a balance.
That's right.
I wanted to specifically thank the superintendent, the administration, the Board of Education for cooperation and assistance on multiple fronts. And the cooperation between Salem and East Lyme, I think, has never been better. And Jeff, I truly appreciate everything that you've done to help along that line. Salem will be reorganizing its Board of Education at our January meeting. With new elections, I do hope to continue in this task if so asked. I did look into the food service arrangement. Unfortunately, we are locked into a several-year more contract. However, when that's up, I sincerely hope that East Lyme will make a proposal that might be worked out. And should you wish to do that, certainly that we can probably do some preliminary work along those lines. And lastly, I would like to wish everyone happy holidays and a Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Good. Okay, that's it for special reports. We do not have a consent agenda. That brings us to our discussion action items for the evening. The first item up for discussion is the East Lyme Public Schools demographic and economic profile and enrollment projections report from Malone and McBroom, and I see Mike Zuba's here to lead us to that. Jeff, was there anything that you wanted to say?
Nope. You've had the packet for a while, so you've had a chance to absorb it. And,
It was very nice to have it ahead of time, too.
Yeah,
really.
Thanks to Mike for getting us that much earlier than we expected.
I would never expect to be able to review it on the same day we're presenting it. That's a challenge.
And I must say, actually, it was very nicely
Very well
done.
done.
Yeah, very well done.
So part of tonight's presentation, I won't spend a lot of time on the demographics and the community profiles we did. We presented that, I believe, about a month or about 5 weeks ago, actually. I will touch on more of the housing economic trends, get into some of the birth analysis that we did, and then really jump right into the enrollment projections, what we're seeing and how that lays out, especially when we're talking about the school construction program that's happening here. So just touching on the overall profile for the town, we've compiled the data from the census as well as the ACS, and then are using the state data center to project out. And overall, we're looking at, I'll say pretty flat overall population for the community. I know it shows to dip off in 2040, but these things are really, really long-range forecasts, and for the purpose of what we're doing with the 10-year school enrollment projections, I really focus on going out to 2020 or so. As part of our neighborhood level analysis, we relied on a lot of the census block group data, and we're showing some maps. We've put together a lot of other data sets that helps fill in the gaps of what's happening from not only a demographic standpoint, but an employment standpoint, and in the case of East Lyme here, a housing standpoint. So this is just your total population as it's broken up by the different block groups within your community, and it's really no surprise if you know the landscape of the community. It lines up a lot of what you're thinking, but we're able to take this and move this into our individual elementary school projections, and later on, as part of the redistricting, take these factors as well into what we're going to project and how we're going to realign the school boundaries. This is population density, no surprise here either. South of 95, really getting closer to the shoreline. You have your much more densely settled areas, your smaller lot zoning, hence you have greater population density, as well as a lot of older, well-established neighborhoods in the community. This is kind of important, so I'll reiterate this, even though we talked about it last time, getting into the age structure. So as Connecticut ages, and it's one of those states that we constantly hear in the news about, the aging population, the loss of the young. This is the census data, going back 2000 to 2010. 2010. So really the last two fully fielded census. You could see in this chart those areas that are bound by the white bars. Those areas are showing the loss of age cohorts, so different segments of the population that have occurred in 2000 to 2010. This really shows shows the growth of those cohorts, so it shows how you're aging in place. We're seeing some loss in the younger cohorts, I'll squint to see it, in the young professional categories where they were much larger in 2000. Flash forward to the most recent census data, and I will say that the 2015 are estimates. They're based on much smaller samples, but what they're seeing is on the left is continued loss of some of the working class, which what we're seeing the younger working class in the community, but what we're seeing more locally when we sort of filter the data is a much different picture, especially with what's happening with the EB job market. That definitely doesn't get picked up by this level of analysis, but then the continued aging of the population. Getting into the overall household size, household trends, we have seen, as reported by the census, a small drop-off in the household size and an increase in your median age, with the median age increasing now to, I believe, about 47 or so, based on the last ACS number. I'm going to pop right ahead onto slide 10 here and spend some time on the housing market. So what we have is we're showing a stacked bar chart with the blue lines or the blue bars representing those single-family sales and the orange bars representing those condos or townhome sales. What we're seeing is a pretty big uptick in the overall sales within the community, and we've gone ahead as part of this analysis and weeded out any family transfers, so any of those property transfers, typically less than $100, that could happen within individuals from family to family. We've weeded those out, so these are a real reflection of the sales that are happening. We do have the 2017 data for 9 months, and we went ahead and we looked at the last 3 months just to be able to have an apple-to-apple comparison, and did a 10-year look back on the proportion of sales that typically occur at the end of the year, and we were able to extrapolate a full year for that. So for the 2017 data, that has been extrapolated, but based on it, we feel it's a pretty good number, especially we needed a good number in order to conduct our projection. So we're seeing that current sales level in the last 2 years is really getting back to your late 90s, early 2000s level, just from a pure activity standpoint in the market. When we take a step back and we look at how East Lyme is impacted with the bigger picture, so we'll say sort of the region, and see if your trends are similar to any of your neighbors or anybody else in the region, what we're noticing that you're really faring well from the housing standpoint, especially from the sales standpoint. The only other community that's on a similar trajectory to you is Waterford within the region, and that's been pretty consistent for the last 5 years or so. A lot of activity is driven, especially what we're seeing in Connecticut and other communities we're working in. This uptick in housing activity, it's not just happening in East Lyme. We're seeing it in other communities, especially those other DURG A, DURG B communities. They're seeing some sharp upticks, especially ones that are proximate to jobs, whether that's in parts of Fairfield County that are capitalizing on the New York job market, especially the job market that's in Westchester, with Connecticut providing a little more affordable option, or some of those in the Hartford region, just north of Hartford, that are also seeing an uptick there. We're still seeing the housing sales price is still lagging where they were prior to the Great Recession, and we see that continuing. So that was a big factor in seeing where you're at. You're still trailing that mark that you had prior to the Great Recession, but the activity has reached a level that's very similar to what was occurring prior to the Great Recession. We purchased the MLS data through the Warren Group and address-matched housing sales across your community, and took a look at the student generation coming from those housing sales. We matched it up against the current year students, so those students for school year 17-18. And from that analysis, we were able to see really what are those hot areas and are we getting students, which we'll see on the next slide. But what we really identified was that those denser areas, Niantic, Giants Neck, especially 161, sort of the area north of the highway there in the Flanders School District, those have been really the hotbeds for a lot of the sales activity in the community. Digging into the development activity, we saw this giant spike in building permits. So these aren't permits for additions onto existing homes. These aren't permits to put a garage in your backyard. These are permits for new construction of either condos or single-family homes. So we had this giant spike as part of the Gateway project, and then it sort of tailed off a little bit. But rather than just relying solely on the data as it's reported, so when a certificate of occupancy or a building permit gets issued, we went ahead and took a little deeper dive into that information by talking with the planning department there. And I don't know why that's not showing up in my slide deck. Can I reload, give you a thumb drive? For some reason, yeah, I'm missing a couple slides in there.
So it's orange.
What's that?
What's orange?
Fire that up, get me on slide 15.
The orange
Thank you.
one.
Sorry about that.
Demolition.
Yeah, we don't have slide 15.
Okay. So those are demolition permits.
You put the PowerPoint on, if that's okay with you. Yeah, there should be a PowerPoint and a PDF, whatever works better. Yeah, you guys are missing slide 15, which is the deeper dive into the development activity, so I apologize for that. But you can follow along on the screen once it gets loaded.
What's the orange line represent on slide 14?
The orange line represents
Demolition permits?
that's, yeah, and I think we're showing the net total, or actually, no, you'd have to calculate the net yourself. So we're showing the new permits in the blue, and then the reductions in the orange there.
So that's
The demos.
The demos are orange?
Right.
Okay.
Still missing 15.
It's not showing up on that one.
I think 15 missing from this one also.
You open up the PowerPoint?
We've all been here.
Technology.
It is. It's the worst.
Yeah, let's start here. Sorry about that.
No, it's happened to all of us.
All right, so talking to Gary Gottschall, we went through a lot of the activity in town and had to make a determination on which ones are going to likely move forward, because we were talking a 10-year horizon, so it's not only what's getting approved, it's sort of the ones that have some credibility after that and we think are likely going to move forward. So we identified about 230 housing units that we anticipate going forward, being constructed, and having an impact, so ones that could generate students as part of as part of this projection report, so really within the next 10 years. 95 of these are single-family subdivisions. I believe about 80% of those single-family subdivisions are currently located within the current Flanders attendance zone. So what you'll see as part of our individual projections for Flanders, we're showing that number, especially in the back half of our projection, to increase as part under the assumption that those subdivisions are going to go forward, going to get occupied, and they're going to bring students in with them as they get purchased. 135 of those units are part of the Gateway Condos development, and what we did was, of the 18 3-bedrooms, we've gone ahead and have done some multipliers to add in projections of school-age children based on what we'll likely get out of those 2- and 3-bedroom units. So I believe it was about 26 students overall. And then we had an additional 50 units, which we didn't feel strongly enough about to be able to add into the projection, so to be able to add additional students from them. But we feel that they likely get captured in the persistency ratios but they weren't of enough likelihood to really pop that we felt to be able to go in and manipulate the projections to add them in. So it's sort of that judgment call when you look at them, you talk with the planning department, you see where they're at, who they are, and whether or not they're going to go forward. And last but not least is the continuance of this Oswegatchie Hills affordable housing. There's little belief that that'll likely go forward and have any impact on what we're talking about.
I'll hope.
Can I ask a question or do I have to wait?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, when you were talking to planning and zoning, did they happen to mention anything about Roxbury, about all that acreage? It was just purchased, so I would doubt that anything would be put in now, but they're clearing it.
On what road?
It's off of Roxbury.
By the town dump.
Huge parcel.
We did not have that one included in the next 10 years. But we did have we had Spring Rock subdivision, Orchard subdivision.
I'm assuming that they're in there because they've actually put in the paperwork. So the one on Roxbury wouldn't
Yeah.
be part of the projection, right?
Yeah,
But it should be on the radar, at least.
Well, I think those things are going to be on the radar, but we're not going to go ahead and manipulate projections. But I
Sure.
think when we create the boundaries, let's see if there's an opportunity to push or pull in a certain direction given capacity and space needs about the ones that we're not generating students from.
Got it.
We
Thank
might
you.
know more sooner than later, too, with, that could be additional information.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest one was Orchard subdivision. There was 50 units there, all single family, and in Flanders now, and that's one we're going to look at as part of when we go through the redistricting to say, this is going to have a big impact, so we'll have to be cautious.
Yeah.
Getting into the other part of the equation, which is really the birth data. So
You gotta add to this.
looking back to the late 90s, early 2000s, you always averaged around 160, 150 births, and then that dropped off, and you've seen some recent instability. However, you had a recent peak of about 144 births, and I believe it was 2013, 2014. That's going to be felt as part of your future incoming kindergarten class, that 144 births, and then we've had this drop-off. So prior to the drop-off, we didn't have a good number for 2017. We once again have 9 months worth of data for 2017 and extrapolated out based on a historic percentage for the last 3 months of the year, and we're looking at about 140 based on our preliminary estimate for 2017. So those birth numbers coming back up again. We did see a marked increase from the reported births. So in order to develop 8-year, which you require for a school construction grant application, or even 10-year projections, we have to make some assumptions and project some birth data. There's two real methodologies for projecting birth data. One is a demographic model using females of childbearing age times fertility rates in order to get an estimate of how many future births we're going to have. But that doesn't work well, especially in a community like East Lyme, and when we're between having really good census data and we're working off of estimates. So if you have a lot of immigration into your community, a lot of housing sales that you've seen an uptick, which breaks the pattern in the past, you're not picking up on those new individuals that are moving into your community if you were to only do the demographic model. So we have this other model that we've been using a lot, especially since the Great Recession. It's really it's a multiple regression equation where we lag housing sales and lag local unemployment rate to look at different permutations until we find a good fit, a really good R-square valued, and then we test that model against the demographic in order to make a determination of which one we want to use for the births. So we identified a two-factor model, really looking at housing sales lagged and including births to be able to project future births. That's what we're showing on this slide. So we threw a whole bunch of squiggly lines out, dotted squiggly lines out past our last good data point of that 137. And then looking at the demographic model, that model is showing us to be able to shoot up an average about 150 or so, 155 over the next 5 years. Then we ran our 3 different regressions with fitting in some assumptions. The first was a low model, which we're saying, housing sales are going to drop back off again. The next was our mid model, which assumes housing sales are going to be very dissimilar to what you've experienced over the last 2 years, maybe with a slight uptick. And then we have our high model that's showing we're looking at a more aggressive pattern, and housing sales are really going to pick up. And what does that do? So we have a range going out to 2022 of about 138 to 163 potential BERTs, and we're really focusing on, and I'll play a little spoiler, is that mid model, which aligns pretty well with the demographic model. So we're really looking at a blend between those two to be the likely area for those future BERTs. Next, we looked at your historic enrollments, and this is just a report back on a lot of what you may already know. Watching those shrinking elementary trends, looking at where you're at today of down just under 2,700 students, but then really focusing on the elementary level, where you went through that big dip going back to the early part of the 2000s and have really flattened out and had a series of dips and bumps along the way, but by and large been below your historic median of where you traditionally operated at in the recent past. Over the last 2 years, we saw this drop off, and then you had that big uptick, I believe it was 2 years ago, where you saw your incoming kindergarten class, the big bubble kind of moved through, and you saw additional students in each one of those grade cohorts move in from what you've had in the past. So this is showing that flattening of that bump that we've seen overall. The middle school, you've had that pretty steady decline and then a flattening after the Great Recession, and then really a much slower decline as the smaller cohorts have moved through to get you to about 800 students is where you're at today. And then, the high school itself, looking at the decline there as well as the flattening that has happened, and you're just over about 1,000 students there, really stabilized at about 1,050. So we map out all the different cohorts, and you can pick up patterns when you look at the change. So I just color code the different changes just to see what's happening. And you can really pick up that cooperative agreement with Salem. As you see, going from 8th grade, you see the green pops up on the chart. So you're seeing those influx of students from Salem into the high school. But for what we're talking about now, we'll focus more on the mapping of the elementary students as they move through the system. What we're seeing overall is growth. You add students typically from year to year, and in the last 2 years, we're seeing that increase is even more evident. We're seeing about a 4% increase overall in the last 2 years for your typical steady grade. So when we look at the combined cohorts from grades 1 through 7 and then 2 through 8 the next year, we're seeing marked increases there across the board of those populations growing. Getting back into our housing sales, so we went through and looked at new to district students. So based on the information that we have, we're able to identify students based on their state ID that weren't in East Lyme Public Schools the year before. We also have our housing sales data just to get an idea of where students are moving in as part of this uptick in the housing market. Is it really focused on one area? Is it spread out more? And what we're seeing is we had 31 students directly associated that weren't in East Lyme. So we know that there's students that are moving within town, but we're really not factoring a lot on those. We want to look at who's new to. So about 31 students moved in over the last year, so since January, as part of housing sales, and about half of those were within Flanders, with the remaining split between Hayes as well as Niantic Center. So Flanders being the big driver as part of student immigration through housing sales there. This just talks about a good way to kind of visualize how we go through our projection methodology. We start with BERT data. We talked about the district-wide BERTs, but what I didn't talk about is the individual BERTs. So the live BERTs we have from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, we map those out to your district as well, looking at where they have occurred, as well as looking at what your future kindergartens are coming from based on BERTs for years 2013, 14, 15. So we have those live BERTs. We have our historic trends as well, so we're starting to establish those historic persistency ratios, as well as all of the housing and demographic data that we had just talked about. All of that goes into this cohort survival methodology. It's really the standard way of looking at projections within a community. We do go ahead and modify it, so where we know we have development, we know we have known projects happening, we'll go in and add to those numbers because the cohort survival is only as good as what has happened in the recent past. So it says the past is a predictor of the future. However, if you know things are getting approved and permitted and constructed, the past only gets you so far. So by all means, add to that to ensure that, we're capturing everything. Then we get into our individual persistencies. So you'll see a lot of numbers in this chart. The main thing is anything over 1 indicates that you grow from year to year there. Whether that's birth to K, which is not year to year, but it's 5 years, it's a 5-year lag, but it's showing that you're growing. So one of the key data points is 16, 17. I highlighted in green, which is really tough to see, I apologize, where you had 1.6 or 1.59. So for every 100 births, you had 160 kindergartners show up. That was your highest ratio you've experienced in any of the past data that we've combed through. You still kept that high immigration of kindergartners, but it dropped off somewhat down to 1.75. Overall, your estimates of migration are on the far right. You've had 2 successive years of over 4% of adding students in those traditionally very stable grades. So that's where we're seeing that housing component kicking in with families moving in to the community with students already as school-age children moving in. And then overall, we're picking those numbers back up into year-to-year variation. What we're not showing is we've done this exact same analysis and exercise for the individual elementary schools. And we've noted the different persistency ratios there as well over the last several years. Those are what forms the basis, as well as those individual births, for your localized projections. So we've done this at various scales, but for brevity tonight, I won't bore you with all of that. Getting into our adjustments, so I mentioned we're seeing a lot of the subdivision activity. The problem with a lot of those units we're seeing, especially in Flanders, it's going to be absorption into the market, full construction of them. So we've added to the persistency ratios rather than going ahead and saying in 2019-20, I'm going to adjust and add so many kindergartners, first graders, second graders, because we don't know what the occupation rate's going to be for that. We just know they're going to generate X amount of students, and we're going to let it filter in kind of randomly over the next 5 to 8 years, rather than putting out something that wouldn't have statistic validity. However, we did have to make some assumptions on the Gateway Commons, so we added 28 students there based on a 10 per 100 unit, and that's really a good factor when you look at the 1-bedroom to 2-bedroom to 3-bedroom split. We think as that gets fully occupied, you're likely to get about 30 additional students coming out of that development, just based on what's planned for that. Getting into our projections assumptions, this is a nice simple way to look at it. So we looked at a high growth scenario, which is, the assumption driving that is that your sales are going to rise 13% pretty quickly over the next few years. Births are going to rise 20%, which, based on what we're seeing, is rather unlikely. We then went through our medium scenario, which has a sales rise of about 5%, births rising about 10%. We think this is the most likely outcome based on what we're seeing from all the information we looked at. And then we have this low growth scenario, which is really a decline in a lot of those key factors, including the housing sales and births. But we don't think this is a likely outcome, but we want to look at what the enrollment generated from that could look like. So getting into your district-wide projections, all scenarios are showing a rebound, and I think that's important. Even the low growth factor is still showing a troughing and a rebound for your district, so for your K-12 grades overall. The high growth scenario, which is based on some assumptions that are not likely to come forward, is showing a pretty marked increase, whereas the medium scenario splits the difference between those. We then took a dive down at the elementary level, where this is a lot of where, especially early on, we're seeing a deviation between the models. So the red line represents the medium, which we think is the most likely scenario, and that's ending up with K-4 enrollment out in years really 7, 8 through 10 of about 1030 through 1050 or so, with the high projection peaking you out at about 1100 or so, but we don't think that that's likely, and the low projection peaking you out at just over 1,000. So even though it looks larger, just because of the y-axis on the scale bar, these are all pretty well packed, especially between the mid and the low there. Then getting into the individual elementary schools, the solid line in the spaghetti chart represents your historic enrollment. The blue, red, or green dash line represents the future enrollments at those elementary schools if you were to decide to change nothing and keep the boundaries in place and all the economic conditions move forward. So we're seeing a marked increase early on in Flanders. That's based on the housing activity we're seeing there, as well as the BERTs that we have there, and in part due to those subdivision activity. Looking at LB Hayes, the growth's a little slower early on, but then is sort of moderate throughout. And then looking at Niantic Center, we see a little bit of an uptick, bringing you to about 210 students, and then it begins to really flatten off in the low twos for the rest of the projection horizon. Getting into the middle schools, the scenarios there's not a lot of spread in the data for those because of a large part of the assumptions are driving the elementary, and we do see some changes in the students that are already there, but it's not really going to be that marked of a difference. It's where you get later on, and you can see where then the projections really range from about 890 to 970, dropping off to about 850 to 940. So, those are really going to be relying on what housing activity has happened and what has happened at the elementary school level. But we're once again focusing our line on that red line, which represents the medium projections overall. So with the number of just around 900 there for the middle school. And then the high school, not much spread on this number. We did only our detailed demographic assessment for the East Line portion of the high school. We allowed the persistency ratio, which is much higher, from 8 to 9, to account for the Salem students, the continued cooperation or cooperative agreement there of them funneling in, not getting into the individual demographics of Salem as the driver for it. And last but not least, I'll go through and, these have some general caveats that, of course, for kindergarten, full day K will remain in place. There won't be a dramatic amount of change in the offerings or what's happening from the private enrollment side of thing, in that as I laid out our housing assumptions, especially based on the number of sales and the subdivision activity of what we know, that these are largely proved to be valid over the life of the projection horizon. Last, and I want to get it back out, and I'll send it out to Jeff tomorrow, is just the detailed projections, which just gives you the raw numbers of the total number of students by grade, by year, just to be able to have that. I should have added it into this, and I apologize that it's not in here. It's nothing I would have presented anyway, but it'd just be nice for the board to have that. And the last part, I want to thank you. As when I was here last, we had talked about some general criteria. I had a little discussion on what we're looking for, and I know as part of your retreat, you came back and you've provided me now with that critical input of what the board is looking to accomplish as far as equity goes, and I know these aren't in any given order, to ensure that enrollments are equitable and resources are equitable across all the schools, considering operational capacities, access to resources, distribution of services. Future growth is sustainable, ensure that the long-term sustainability for the plan, we putting in all these other factors of what's going on, have some capacity based on the enrollment projection. So as we're going through and balancing, we'll be looking at all of that. See if there will be any additional capacity per school. The board reserves the right to make adjustments based on the enrollment projections, and there will be future adjustments to lines as necessary as part of that. And then the last criteria is impact to families and students, just really keeping the neighborhoods as a whole where possible and limiting students' travel time to conform with your policies, and overall to take this as an opportunity to enhance the family involvement within the schools themselves. So the next steps, now that we've gotten through the demographics, it's really going to dig in with the folks that are handling the school construction, taking that information and laying out a series of options in order to be able to present those alternatives back to the community for everyone to be able to weigh on. So we're moving nicely on through the process. I'll turn it over to the board if there's any specific questions on the information I presented tonight.
Mike, very nice job.
Yeah, sorry about the missing slide. I will get that out in the new copy. I think it's when I printed the PDF, I may have like omitted slide 15, and the Adobe thing remembered it or something.
I think, from my vantage point, the quality and the statistical modeling and the like is just like invaluable. And I'm just so glad that we have this, and I'm looking forward now to seeing all this information turned into action. Jamie?
I have a question. What is typically the next step if we weren't in the middle of a construction project?
If you weren't in the middle of a construction project.
Like what, after you present, normally after you present a board with all this information, what happens?
If they're not building something, typically I'm there because you're either building something, closing something, or moving something around. So we would talk about, it's a lot of great information, not only even before your schools are constructed for what you're going to do budget-wise for the next couple of years, programming-wise, but really it's to digest the information and see what it means to your operations, for the district. If you needed to make any decisions in the interim, for us, it's really to say, how does this fit in with how many students we're going to have as part of sites that may be occupied as part of school construction, and be able to plan around how we're going to be able to move the students around to get to that final landscape of the elementary schools.
So what's typically the next step? After you've presented the board with this, what are you looking for us from the next step?
The next step for you guys would be to look at this stuff, let me know if there's any additional questions. I know you've had some time, and then I'm going to come back and present some more options. And those options are going to revolve around redistricting options. You've given me criteria. We're going to look at what's going on with the facility construction program, and I'm going to do a little bit of a menu, and then I can get a good idea of what works and what doesn't work, and some concerns just being drawn out as part of showing those different options.
So the next step is you're going to talk to the construction people and figure out what they're doing. What
their needs are, what they're doing, how the ultimate capacities may lay out. Now that I'm showing within 10 years and really 8 years, which is the key number for school construction grant. You basically take your maximum enrollment for those grade levels, so it's right around 1050. How does that get divvy up amongst the schools? What's going to be enshrined in the program, and then how do we create the boundaries around that?
Okay, thank you.
What's your recommended timeline for starting to hold some of those community meetings that we were talking about previously? Like, at what stage in the process should we really be thinking?
You really want to have it where people are going to be engaged. So, I always try to recommend when you get out of the throes of the budget season and before everybody leaves for the summer, that's a really great time to talk about a lot of this stuff because people are focused on it, and it's not getting drugged down with a lot of the other discussions that happen in a community as far as school budget goes and passing the budget. I think that's a really good time. And then if you try to do it in the summer, people typically aren't really truly engaged because they're off.
Sure. So it should be within the upcoming months.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're getting into that. I mean, we're in really good timing right now. We're getting right into that really good spot for it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Barbara?
I know I'm sort of jumping ahead, but I'm trying to get this in my mind here with the, projected numbers for the 3 schools as we move forward. But with the total number, right, being around 1,000.
1,000 to 1050, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So ideally, right, if we could do it, we'd be talking about 300 and something at each school, right?
If you want to split them up a third, a third, a third.
Right, fairly evenly, right? That would be the ideal thing.
Yeah.
Because the way we're showing it now, obviously, there's a huge discrepancy particularly between Flanders and Niantic Center, which I'm assuming we would not want to maintain.
In 99.9%, most communities don't want to maintain that. However,
Based on school
and
size.
I'm not sure, I don't remember when you're putting in your construction grant application in, if you haven't done so already. It's in already.
We're planning to start this June construction.
All right. So looking at where the students fall since that's already set, is going to be about dividing it up evenly and then looking at what the ultimate arrangement of each building is. So if we were to do 350 at every building, say, would be the third. Looking at the facilities when they're done through the eyes of the architect and say, what is the true capacity of this building, and do you have enough space there? You know, and I don't know the buildings, not being an architect, I haven't gone in them, so you have to look at like what the final design capacity of the building's going to be,
Right,
and
I
say,
think we know that already.
and then say, is 350 the right number, and then be able to work it that way.
Right, because I'm concerned about, the projected number for Flanders.
We'd have to change the boundary for
Right,
that.
I
yeah.
believe is higher than the capacity.
Right.
Right. So clearly, that isn't going to work.
Yeah, there's going to have to be adjustments made to, what those catchments are, to be honest with you.
Yep. Right down to looking too at, the number of classrooms available.
Right.
Sections at each, each grade level. So
Right.
that's what's- Looking at numbers well over 1,000.
Yeah.
That's higher than we were.
Then we were, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
not
So we
each
gotta double
building
back on
has the
that.
same capacity in
Right,
it.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Isn't it like 400 each building,
No.
Give or take.
roughly?
Yeah, roughly.
Right?
Yes, so we're gonna set it like a day one projection too, of looking at early on, and then rerun the model to look at, is that gonna grow throughout, and do adjustments need to be made to the boundaries because we're putting in areas that are gonna experience subdivisions or additional housing growth to ensure that, it's not gonna grow uncontrollably from other areas.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I'm just looking at our whole goal with this is to not to have one school that's significantly lower than the other two, which is what these projections show, which
Yeah.
is a reason why we want to redistrict. I mean, we don't want to end up with, 200 less students in one school than another school.
Yeah, it wouldn't make much sense to go through the program and not change the boundaries.
Right.
But you will get the information from the architect and really in the constructionist in terms of the capacity of these three facilities upon their completed renovations.
Upon a completed renovation. And if anything is, some of the details too, if there's going to be anything unusual about any of the programs on, fitting kids in there in the interim that would have to.
Right. Yep.
For an occupied renovation.
Yep.
Well, to speak to that, I mean, the projection at Flanders is spiking up
Yep.
immediately. So, that's beyond the capacity currently. So the construction plan is going to have to address that right away. I mean, it's not upon completion, it's going to be during the construction.
Yeah, to phase it somehow.
Exactly.
I don't know what the best solution is now, but I know after having some conversations, we'll be able to kind of work through a good phasing plan.
Okay, so it's fair to say the next time that you come to us, we're going to have tentative boundaries to kind of see what it's going to possibly look like.
Yeah.
After having conversations with the building.
Right. And you could give me input on it and all the like.
So we'd expect to see you in
I was thinking
late January?
Mid to late January?
Early February.
Early February?
Early February, yeah.
Can I just add quickly?
Sure,
that
yeah.
I mean, the plan that you gave, it really was fantastic. I found myself nodding my head, yes, 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 because this is kind of, well, no, it is, what some of us have said was going to be happening. It just wasn't justified. No one
Yeah.
could give it to us.
Was there anything
You know what
out there
I'm
that didn't
saying?
agree with what living here locally would, is there anything I missed or you'd say I?
No, the only thing that came to mind was the fact that we have a high rental base, and I brought that up before. That's really not something that you can judge, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But we do. We have a very high rental base, so.
That typically gets baked into the equation, like if it's already been happening that way. It would be when you add a significant amount of new rental is where,
No, I see.
or you would change sort of the rental paradigm. If your seasonal rental ended and all went to year-round rental
Yep.
in those same units, then that would be like a big shift that we would definitely try to account for. Yeah,
Okay, no, I think you did a fantastic job.
thank you.
Jill?
I just have two questions. First of all, do any of us know the capacity of the schools and what they're going to be when they're completed? We don't have that number anywhere.
The square, yeah, we do. The square footage, rough square footage is not changing. We're not adding on any additional space. And the classrooms themselves are all pretty much staying exactly.
But so what do we anticipate the number of students? So, for example, how many more can Niantic Center take?
That's where we have to factor in.
Okay, so
Yeah,
we got to factor
exactly.
that in.
Yep.
And the second question I have is it his responsibility to develop the shifting student plan during the construction phase? Or are we doing that? Because I can be honest with you, I can't remember.
The actual redistricting plan, Joe, when you say shifting, the moving of kids?
Moving of kids during the construction plan, and then after the construction plan is over, after the construction is over,
Yeah.
where the kids will finally go.
So those are two different things. So the phasing component, that's
That's it,
our.
phasing.
Yeah, that's our responsibility.
Okay, I couldn't
Yep,
think of
that's
the
what we're
words, I
working on.
apologize.
And then the actual moving from kids out of the building to another building would come after.
So when do we start working on our phasing?
Already working.
Already
heavily
working
into
on it, and
Who's working on it?
The principals
Principals.
have been working with O&G.
construction company.
Oh, okay, I didn't.
Yeah, it's just basically moving clusters of
And
teachers
as
around.
Bill,
So you can
Bill
let us know,
predicted,
just give us a-
the tough one is Flanders.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So, excuse my language, so we're gonna get just a little information on that shifting?
If you'd like it, yeah, we can easily show you the
I'd
phasing.
love to hear about
I
it.
would like it.
Yeah.
I would like it very much, because we're gonna be, I think we might be asked a bit, some of us might be asked about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, we can easily do that in maybe January.
Yeah.
I didn't know they
yeah.
were working on it, so.
Yeah, no, they've been, that's been number one priority for
Yep.
the construction company, that's really super important so that they
Oh,
can
very.
lay out everything that, how they're going to approach everything.
Like in January, if we could go.
January
It is
8th,
almost.
Al Jakunski's going to be here
Yeah.
at the January 8th
And we
meeting.
can talk about
So
what the
maybe
plan
we
to shift students.
Yeah, maybe we could tie
How
into
they're-
phasing.
I would love it. Thank you
We
very
could
much.
show the diagrams too. They might not be done by then, but we can
Okay.
show them.
Putting pressure on.
Yeah, yeah. They're ready. Maybe the Flanders, we'll see.
On at 12:30 tomorrow. Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
No, Mike, thanks.
you.
Have a
Fantastic.
good holiday, everybody.
Yes, you too.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, next item for discussion and action is the proposed East Lyme Board of Education calendar meeting dates. And I think we've made the adjustments, or Lynn has captured the adjustments of moving the policy committee, getting the committee meetings lined up as was recommended at our last meeting. So, we have a chance to kind
Can
of.
I just say something?
Yeah, Jamie.
I just want to say something. I love you all dearly, but is there any way for us to go back to one long meeting in December instead of 4 or 5 short ones?
Oh, I see, yeah.
It was a hard one.
December used to be like the easiest month because of the holidays. We had one meeting every December. And I feel like every year we add more and more and more to the month of December.
Hopefully, we've reduced in January, though, because remember, we had 4 meetings a
We still
month in
have 4 in January. There's still 4.
We're trying to take at least 2 of those off because we had the budget workshops in December, and we won't have to have
But
those
my
budget-
thing is we had one really, really short one in December, and this one looking like it's going to be really, really short too. I'd rather have one long one than 2 short ones plus a budget meeting.
Yeah.
That's just I love you all, but I'd like my Mondays in December off. That's just my personal,
It is hard.
Yeah.
especially with December being holiday time.
Yeah,
And
nope.
There's only 2 December meetings,
There's
board
3.
meetings. Wednesday is this,
Right, but it's still, we've had 2 meetings this month, 2 budget meetings this month. It's
It's been hard.
hard.
It is, no,
It's hard
yeah,
to put in 4 meetings in December,
yeah. Well,
especially when we used to just do 1. That's just my personal take.
Do you want to try and tie in a budget workshop on the night of a, or combine,
you can't.
or just take one off, or?
It's up to you guys. That's I'd rather do 1 long one than 2 short ones. That's just my
then you'd
personal.
have to have 3 committee meetings all on the same night.
I don't care. I'm just, it's a lot for me to get out of the house 4 or 5 times in December. That's just me. I'm just one voice. You guys, you asked for opinions, so that's my opinion.
It's a busy
I could
month.
go either way.
There's like
Doesn't-
school
I just don't
events,
see how
work
we'd have
events.
3 committee meetings and a board meeting all in the same
Looking at
night.
that list,
It would be a marathon meeting.
You can
We
be-
do,
Yeah,
we do.
yeah. Well, and then there's all sorts of other things too you have to take into account. I mean, you guys put in a lot, we all put in a lot of time.
30-something.
And I tell you, it's painful and if you can't, if people can't make meetings, there's 10 of us, okay?
No, I know, and
Yeah, so-
it's just, I missed one meeting this
Yeah,
month
I
because
know.
I couldn't get out of the house, but I just,
Yep.
I think I missed you.
Yeah, I know, it's really hard for,
December's hard with all the kids' stuff and family stuff and holiday stuff.
I think it's important because we
Wait.
just I don't like to miss them.
yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah, and it,
Lord, do a 7-hour meeting.
yes, it's very difficult.
Let me ask this question. Have people, or if individuals wanted to keep the structure of having 2 budget workshops, one in November and one in December? Has that been, we've done that the last 2 years. Has that been productive?
I have found those to be very valuable to us, and that's just my opinion. It's something that is new, and I find that it really helps us.
I
Maybe
agree,
start there
Candace.
and work around that. Maybe if we want to keep that.
Soup, too.
Soup works, but
that's right.
that round table, I like that table, sit and talk.
Because I do too. I think that's been beneficial.
No, I think the budget workshops are great. It's a lot.
So what I'm saying is if we
Yeah.
kept that, maybe then one of the meetings comes
Yeah.
off.
Right. I mean, personally, I
possible.
prefer more short meetings than
The marathon session.
marathon long
Yeah,
meetings.
because you can never get to
then
sleep and go to
they're a
work.
waste, because I
People get tired
can't,
of
I
doing
can't
that.
do,
Time we all
I know.
check
I
out.
can't do
Yeah.
5 or 6 hours of meeting in one day.
And you're
Yeah.
teaching
And
the
that's
next
fine.
day.
I'm
You teach, well, everybody here.
And we all-
I mean, everybody's
all are
working, but
working.
5 or 6 hours after you've been working all day is
Oh,
just,
Yeah,
Yep.
it's
that's
very
not productive.
By the end of the night, it does.
You need to go back to the day of the men in white and
Yeah.
blue suits that were retired.
Well, let's,
No, you asked for
let's-
opinions, and that's just my
yeah,
opinion.
let's note that,
I'm entitled to my opinion,
let's
and
note
that's
it.
what it is. Do with it what you
and
may.
as we come up against that December, or as we get into the fall of next year, then we should just take a look and say, what do we see, what's on our plate and all that stuff. So the meeting dates can, we can change, adjust these things, so.
How about the 6 o'clock start time?
I love it. Sometimes it's
I
hard.
like the 6 o'clock start,
I
that's
like
fine.
the 6 o'clock start time. Sometimes committee 5 o'clock start times
It's a
can be a
little
little
It is, it's
tough.
dicey.
Yeah.
5:15 actually makes a huge difference. 5:15 I can do. 5 I'm like, it's a little tight, but I like the 6 o'clock.
Yeah, I like
meeting.
starting at 6. I like getting out early.
I do too.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
work gets in the way
Well, that's
though.
not a bad idea.
I would be all for that as well.
Did you start that, Jeff?
Well, we traditionally, we've done it in December.
In December, last couple of
So we're
years
out
we've done
early,
that.
because it's dark out.
Let's keep it that
I
way.
think, I do think, and I'm trying to think about whether whether 6 o'clock works as well in May as it does in December. It certainly works well
Right.
in December, but
Well, we can reevaluate then. We can look at it again after the time change. I like the 6 o'clock because then I can get up and go. I mean, it's just hard to go to bed and unwind after these
Yes.
exciting meetings because you're processing.
No, you're right, Joe.
You're processing because you know.
So we haven't had,
It off.
okay. So do you want to
Accept it and change it later?
change it later?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Accept it as is now?
Let's look at it in October. Put that.
Back on the agenda for discussion?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll add it back on.
In the fall? Okay.
And no one should be thought poorly of if they can't make meetings.
No, you guys put in more than your fair
my
share.
gosh.
Okay,
Life happens.
you want to make a motion now?
Yes. I move to approve the revised East Line Board of Education meeting date calendar for 2018, dated 12/18/17 as presented.
Second.
Barbara seconds it. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, unanimous. Next one is East Lyme Board of Education Committee assignments for 2018. I guess we don't have to approve this, right? Yeah, so it's just, we just made the adjustments.
Yep.
Tidied it up, I guess.
Tidied it up. Added some stuff.
Yep.
More liaisons.
Okay.
Had before.
All set with
Yeah.
that? Okay. The East Lyme Public School Elementary School Alterations Project update. Jeff, you want to go ahead?
Well, yeah, we can kind of
Yep.
tag team this one, Bill's. Here, we were supposed to have a budget discussion on the project that was this last Wednesday, I believe. That did not happen after some further review, discussion, and O&G, I think, requiring, more time to really break down. Remember the last meeting, we talked about them needing to break down this budget to a more understandable version. So we have a meeting scheduled for this Thursday, so that will occur, that review, that
Okay, so
more
they didn't
detailed
do
review.
that.
So they haven't done that yet. No, they've not done that.
Should we be nervous? I feel nervous that they haven't.
Well, I felt so nervous that Rocky, the chair of the town committee, and myself took a road trip to Torrington where
Oh,
O&G
okay.
is, and we spent a full day with the architect and the O&G guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, it
Thank
was.
you for
very much.
validating
That's
my
when I came
nervousness.
back, that was what I
appreciate
came back for the budget workshop. That's why
Okay.
it was, so I.
That's why I
went-
got nervous when they said these cost overruns. I was like, oh, my God.
Yeah, so, and Jill, we took your advice that you've been giving us, and that hopefully we're going to see, are we going to have a conversation tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yes.
Tomorrow, we're going to have a
2 o'clock.
pre-conversation before the building committee has their meeting on Thursday. And hopefully we'll have it all broken down so we can still see the contingency money, and to see why certain things have gone up, and what are the options for making it all work out, so that when we go out to bid, we still have a nice pile of contingency money that we can work with, and that's definitely going to happen. So I don't think it'd be nervous. These projects, it goes like this. And Ken Biega, the vice president of O&G, said these are always the hardest ones that have the most anxiousness in them, because they're alteration projects. They're not, you're not building a brand new school, or you're not completely gutting the whole thing. So you have this continuous dealing with scope creep, which is, you can have scope creep within an item that you selected. Okay, and it's like, oh, I thought what that meant, as you got into more granularity around what the definition of that item is, it's like buying drinking fountains. How many, can you fill a water bottle? Can you take a drink out of it? Where are the levers and all that stuff? So everything's a little more complicated as you get into the final detailed design.
And keep in mind, nothing has been bid on yet either, so we don't know what those numbers are going to come in at. Hopefully lower when you have multiple bids, and there's a lot of districts that are out there involved in school projects right now, so that's going to help more of a bidding war and drive costs down. So hopefully that will help. But we will, after Tim and Rocky's trip, last week to Torrington, tomorrow will be a little bit of a quick follow-up discussion, and Thursday will be the budget meeting, and then Alan O&G will be here on January 8th. To present that information, we can have a full dialogue and discussion about it. So.
Okay.
Thanks again for doing that road trip.
Your road trip, yeah. It was fun.
Thursday's meeting's at 6 o'clock in that same room that we met in last
So
time.
we'd be Haynes, yes. Got that same teacher lounge.
It should. Hopefully, yeah. I think it's gonna go good.
It should at this point.
Yeah.
So
Okay. We all set?
that's about it, yeah.
Okay. The last item we have is the annual review of the Board of Education Code of Ethics, which is on the flip side, and since we don't actually have any brand new board members or whatever, these guys have all done this before, so.
Right, yearly tradition, right?
It's a yearly tradition, so we can check a box for the CABE honor or
Well,
CABE
just
award
not even
thing.
that, just so we can all remember what they are.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And, yeah, I think we've been, actually done very well. Yeah. Okay. All right. Administration reports.
Just a few quick items. You all saw hopefully my update regarding the dehumidification system. That was a bit troublesome as it pertains to quotes. There's the project, purchasing of the item, and then there's the installation component. It's more on the installation of obtaining quotes for the installing of that dehumidification system here. So we did go round and round. It did get approved and moved forward to the town meeting, but Mariana and I reached out to the representative that we've been working on, and being a specialized piece of equipment, he is generating a letter speaking to the fact we can't just go out and get an electrician off the street to come in and hook this system up, sort of thing, is to kind of speak to it in those terms. So we'll have that. We need to submit that to the town, and we'll give it to the Board of Finance chair as well. But the town meeting is Wednesday night, so hopefully that will pass through, as well as the technology acquisition plan.
Share the draft policy that the
Yes, that's the other piece, that the Board of Finance has been working on for a period of time, a purchasing, I mentioned that as well, this purchasing policy.
This is a miracle.
This is a, yeah, I see the face value in what they're trying to do, but, this is a 7-page policy that really guides and dictates when we come forward with items, the process of how that's going to unfold. So they did the same thing with the Cheney Park bathrooms after I presented that night, last Wednesday. They hit them with the same thing. Did you get quotes on bathrooms that are stationary and not on a mobile trailer, because that's what they have to use down there because of flood zones. So we both got hit, but they want to put this in place. I don't know when it's going to go into place.
When did this policy go into effect?
It hasn't. This is draft.
Well, then therefore it's not in place.
They've been working on it for 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Well, then it's not a policy.
Right. It's not yet. It's not yet, but they're pushing some components of that. Yep. So we'll see where where that goes. But we've got a form that Mariana used to use in a previous district. We will put that in place and move forward with that. So Wednesday night, that will pass. FFO, we talked about the 545K. Well, I know you, Barbara, you can talk about that, and Tim at the next, when you give your report. One other quick item, we're working on setting up a meeting with Waterford. I don't have a date yet, but I spoke to the Waterford superintendent about myself, Mariana, and I haven't told Kim yet, but Kim Davis. And then the Waterford special ed director, Superintendent Waterford, and their finance individual, to start looking at, some cost savings measures around the world of special education, transportation. They have their own fleet of vans over there that they use. We don't. We go out to Curtin.
Okay.
So are there ways that, and I don't know, Kim, we're going to find out, are there any students that are traveling in the same direction? So, could we, Montville has they use their own as well. Yep. They have their own buses too. Yep. But are there any ways of some consolidated savings in travel, where we could catch a ride with Waterford or do something different?
I like
so
that.
we're going in that direction. So
Very good.
So we'll see. And then just happy holidays, everybody. Enjoy the week next week. We're all looking forward to it, so wish you all the best for the holiday season.
Good. Excellent. Amy, anything?
Just a couple things. So Kim Davis and I co-chair together, which she does now, that she co-chairs the ad hoc committee with me, as far as the social emotional ad hoc. And that committee has been working and has gotten to a place of identifying sort of how we define social emotional competencies, as well as at our next meeting, we will actually bring to them a possible assessment tool in which we'll use across the district in order to assess our students. The assessment tool that we're bringing to them is one in which they recommended, so they've been spending meetings looking at various tools. And so we're excited about that moving forward. It's part of our district improvement plan. The other thing, as a parent here of an elementary or middle school student, you may or may not have received the robocall, which is new this year, in the sense that Stacy Mascarella and all of her due diligence work with Infinite Campus. What we now have at the elementary and middle school is 1 hour after the start of the school day, if your child has been marked absent and you have not sent in the appropriate written notification to the office, you will receive an automatic phone call as a parent saying that your child has been marked absent today. Please contact the school and follow through with appropriate measures. Part of that is so that we ensure that we have not only accurate attendance on a daily basis, but also to ensure that we know where every child is and we accept that responsibility. So that's something new that got implemented at both the elementary and middle school level. You quickly know how accurate your data is when you get a call and you realize that, oh my gosh, I thought my kid got on the bus. Nope, they're here. It's just we had inaccurate data. So I think that's gone very well. And I think our secretarial staff and our principals have done a great job in working with their staff and ensuring that, which is great. We want to ensure student safety. The other piece that I just want to comment on, and the other hat, obviously, that I wear is the talent management hat, which is Frontline Central. So one of the things for the first time is that we are very close, I would say 90% close, to having every district-wide form that we have electronic and fillable PDF for our staff, meaning that every staff member in the district, our goal is at the end of January, Stacy and I are working on this, is to roll it out across the district, meaning that any staff member can log into their Frontline Central site and you will have access to any district-wide form. And that includes any form affiliated with a board policy, and it can be filled out electronically at the comfort of their own home or wherever that may be. So that's something that's pretty big for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is.
That's awesome.
There you go, Bill.
That may help with the copying costs. I don't know. But I think it's important for our staff. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to access those things. And I think we're working really hard, especially with our building administration and also hearing for teachers, is that we need to get better at district-wide forms. So a lot of times our schools have been left to create their own forms to deal with either a policy or something of that nature. So we're also trying to tackle, no, we're going to create district-wide forms, and then that way they have district-wide letters, and it creates more flow in regards to our process. So
That's
those
awesome.
are sort of some of the things that Stacey Mascarella and I have been working on.
That's very good.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
great.
you very much for supporting her position. It's huge to move
Yeah.
us forward, so thank you.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Great. Mariana, anything to share?
Just working on the budget for next year, and then working on, obviously, with the $45,000.
And thanks for the support of the Board of Finance meeting the other night.
Oh,
It was good. Gosh, it just went on and on. How late were you there?
10:30, I think.
10:30?
I believe so.
Yeah, Mariana.
Tim and I left Jeff there.
Yeah, we left you there.
I took one for the team. It's like Dave.
He's the one making the big bucks.
I took one for the,
Yeah, so, anyway, important. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to committee reports. We had an FFO meeting this afternoon at 5. You want anything to share on that, Barbara? Or?
Just that we spent a lot of time talking about how we're going to come up with the 500 and
Yeah.
45, yeah.
$45,000 that we have to give back to the town, and Marianne is going to sort of produce a list that we can show you, so you'll see where we're suggesting that we get the money, the funds, so you know. But, and we talked about the fact that, once we do that, we're sort of bare bone, so that if we have an unexpected expense, we'd either have to go back to the town or tell the town we can't give them the whole 545. So it's not a lot of wiggle room left, especially when you have to take $545,000 out. So, and then we are talking about the pool position that Jack used to fill that he doesn't want to do anymore, and we're going back. We need some more information because we're not exactly sure what the total hour scope of the job is. So before we can decide what we're going to do, we have to kind of have more information. So that was basically it.
Okay. All right, that takes us to board comments and future agenda items. Hey, Jamie?
I feel like I always have my hand up for this one. So 2 board comments. One, because it doesn't get posted on the retirement section, Miss Paula, who's a 40-plus year bus driver for our district, is retiring. Her last day is Friday. She's been here for over 40 years. Her name doesn't get in this because she doesn't work for us. She works for the bus company. But she's retiring after 40-some-odd years on Friday, so she's going to be very, very missed by a lot of people. And then my second one is that Mike Susi and I went to the Miracle League meeting 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And it was amazing. And there was over 20 people who turned out to be on that, in the planning stages of that. But Mike and I did point out that it would be happening the exact same time as the Flanders was being built, that they'd be potentially digging up the field to build a field. So we kind of pointed out that they might want to talk to the town building people about that.
That quick, huh?
Yeah.
That quick?
They're already at $64,000 raised in a month.
Nice. That's going
I
to
don't
be
think it's-
They need 300.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
Okay, well,
but we kind of told them that you might want to talk to the town building department because we have a school project happening at the exact same time.
yeah.
So
That's good.
So that's on the radar.
Good catch.
Okay.
Good,
Wow,
yeah.
I mean,
Nice catch.
we're like,
definitely.
That actually might work out in their favor, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
honestly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
so that, it's looking really good. It's full steam ahead on that.
Excellent, excellent.
All right, we'll keep an eye on it. Thanks, Jamie.
Yep. Barbara?
And, Barbara?
Yeah, I have a suggestion. This is about board packets. I want to suggest a way we could use less paper, okay? Like, for instance, when we got the minutes from the last board meeting, we got a whole additional copy of Amy's presentation, which I
Yeah,
believe
yeah.
is like our 3rd copy. I really think we don't have to keep giving back, like when we have a presentation, we got it when we did it. I think the minutes don't, I would like to suggest that the minutes don't need to include those things again. We'd kind of do the same thing with policies, like the policy committee. Now, we actually have a booklet that we get
Right.
when we first start. I think we waste a lot of paper printing up those policies for like 3 meetings before we finally approve them. I mean, I would think that you get it once, unless we change it, we shouldn't have to print it out for people. You know, I mean, I think we're wasting paper. Plus, we're adding a lot of time to Lynn, who makes up those packets. I don't think we need, I mean, I don't think I need to have another copy. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but I think it's, personally, I think it's a waste of paper.
Yeah, I think that but so I don't know if there's a way that you can do that where you have, you know, here's the minutes for approval, and then you have maybe a one sheet that just says, and the minutes will also include the following items.
Right.
But you're not getting another copy of the presentation.
I mean, you know,
Yeah, I
maybe
see.
for the sake of the one that goes down to the town,
Probably.
yes,
Yeah.
they need
Yeah,
it.
being selective
But
is-
we don't need
Yeah.
it, because we've already gotten it all, and
Yeah.
we get it.
It
And like
is.
with policies, we get them like 3 or 4 times. It's crazy.
Or somehow put our website link, which takes you right to
Yes.
the actual document itself electronically.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we
yeah.
do that.
Because
Yeah, if we
really,
can
it's
add
just,
those.
it's a
Yeah.
lot of paper.
Good
and It's a
suggestion.
lot of work for Lynn, which I think is kind of silly.
Have you ever engaged in an opt-out option? So like, it's not uncommon for a board, like if I'm paperless person, if I have an opt-out option, then I would opt out of the packet, so then she doesn't have to send it to me at all, that I'm just receiving it electronically, so then I opt out. And then, you know, you're only copying for the people who like the hard copy, and then everybody else,
Yeah, I could
you're
print
either
everything at
operating.
work.
Yeah.
John's not
The whole
used
room
that.
of my house that's filled with board packets would really love to
It's
go
something other
paperless.
boards
I weeded.
Yeah.
I just
I
want
weeded.
to
My
add on
husband
to
was very
that
happy that I
caveat,
did.
because I do think that some of the members
You gotta put
would
addition
like
on your
to do
house.
that, and then some wouldn't.
Right.
So I don't know
Right.
if it will work for me, but I think that it would.
Yeah, I don't
And I
have-
think that it
yeah.
would help and then set the model for,
I don't have any
less.
problems
Right.
with trying,
but
you
then
know,
for
for the,
schools don't.
yeah, for the approval of the minutes. We haven't had, yeah. Good suggestion.
And then the other comment I had was, I was looking at, and I know I've said this before, and I know we've sort of gotten an explanation for this, but when you look at the supplemental appointments, there's like 22 of them. 16 of those people are not affiliated with East Lyme. And some of them, the entire team, like the coach and the assistant coach, are run by people who are not teachers in the school district. So my question is, I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but my question is, how much contact is there? I mean, there's an advantage to having a coach who works in the school, I would think, who has relationships with the kids outside of the team, which isn't a necessity. But what I'm wondering is, how much contact is there between coaches and teachers in terms of students' academic performance? And if that does occur, how does it occur when the person is not an East Lyme employee? And I don't expect an answer tonight, but I'd be curious to that, because it seems to me that the trend, it's one of the things I look at when we get these, it seems to me the trend is that more and more of our coaches are not East Lyme teachers. And I understand why that might be, and I know we've gotten an explanation. But I'm just curious about how much contact is there between coaches and teachers in terms of how the kids are doing academically. I mean, I know that used to be a thing. Maybe it's not a thing anymore. Maybe we don't do that anymore. But if we do, how do we do it when we have so many coaches that don't work for us?
I have my thoughts, so let me gather a little bit of information. I could easily put that in a weekly.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Send that out. Mike and I
That
can
sounds
talk
good.
a little bit further, too.
Okay.
So, yep, good question, Barb.
And since Eric's watching his daughter play basketball right now, Eric would like to come and have, for a future agenda topic, maybe the first meeting in January, just share some thoughts he has concerning grade point average calculations and reporting and so forth at the high school.
I thought we were doing that at AAA.
We already did.
It was discussed, yeah. We pulled some information off of a small committee. My recommendation to Eric was to bring it to the full board and let the full board decide whether or not this is something you want to discuss further or entertain us, moving forward with looking at in a deeper capacity. It was done, the change was made 3 years ago, start with which
Right.
in 2015. So I think that's the best when a board member brings something forward. I think he or she should bring it to the full board for, whether or not you want us to move forward.
Okay.
So, but he's willing to bring some information that maybe we can give an opportunity in January, and then you all can take it from there. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Good? Okay. That it? Good?
Public comment.
We don't have need for...
No.
Okay.
Public comment.
Public comment? No? Okay. I guess that only leaves one thing.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, everybody. 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 Everybody.